The Rosewood Hotel's grand ballroom was a vision of elegance and romance. Shimmering chandeliers cast a warm glow over the space, their light dancing off the crystal glasses and polished silverware that adorned each table. White roses cascaded from the ceiling like an ethereal waterfall, their delicate petals occasionally drifting down to settle on the pristine tablecloths. The air was thick with the mingled scents of flowers, gourmet food, and the unmistakable buzz of excitement that only a wedding can bring. I stood at the center of it all, my heart swelling with joy as I looked around at the faces of our friends and family. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, the beginning of forever with Daniel, the man I loved more than I ever thought possible. The months of planning, the stress of coordinating every little detail, it had all led to this perfect moment. My gaze fell on Daniel, standing tall and handsome in his tailored tuxedo. His dark hair was neatly combed, and his warm brown eyes sparkled as he laughed at something his best man had said. I couldn't help but smile, remembering how we'd met 2 years ago at a charity gala. He'd spilled his drink on my dress, and what could have been a disaster turned into the start of a beautiful romance. As I smoothed down the front of my white gown, a stunning creation of lace and silk that had made me feel like a princess the moment I put it on, I caught sight of my parents. Mom was dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, while Dad beamed with pride. They had been so supportive throughout this whole process, even when Daniel's family had been less than welcoming. That thought brought a slight frown to my face. Daniel's mother, Eleanor, had always been distant. From the moment Daniel had introduced me, I'd felt her cool disapproval. She was old money, with a lineage that could be traced back to the Mayflower, and I was just a girl from a middle-class family who'd made good. No matter how hard I tried, no matter how much Daniel reassured me, I could never quite shake the feeling that I wasn't good enough in her eyes. But I pushed those thoughts aside. This was my wedding day, and I wasn't going to let anything ruin it. The ceremony had been beautiful, filled with tears and laughter in equal measure. Now, as the reception was in full swing, I allowed myself to relax and enjoy the moment. Laughter and toasts echoed through the space, glasses of champagne clinking in celebration. The band was playing a lively tune, and couples twirled on the dance floor, their joy infectious. I spotted my college roommate, Sarah, chatting animatedly with one of Daniel's cousins. She caught my eye and gave me a thumbs up, mouthing his cute. I chuckled, making a mental note to tease her about it later. Daniel's arm slipped around my waist, and I leaned into him, savoring his warmth and the faint scent of his cologne. "Having fun, Mrs. Hartley," he murmured, his breath tickling my ear. I turned to face him, unable to keep the grin off my face. "More than I ever thought possible, Mr. Hartley," I replied, stretching up on my toes to plant a quick kiss on his lips. "I still can't believe this is real." He smiled back, but there was something in his eyes, a flicker of, what? Worry? Guilt? Before I could ask, it was gone, replaced by the look of adoration I'd grown so accustomed to. "Trust me, it's very real," he said, squeezing my hand. "And it's only the beginning." Just then, the band struck up a slower song, our first dance. Daniel led me to the center of the dance floor, and as we began to sway to the music, the world seemed to fade away. It was just us, lost in each other's eyes, surrounded by the love of our friends and family. As we danced, I couldn't help but reflect on our journey. It hadn't always been easy. There had been arguments, misunderstandings, and moments of doubt. But through it all, our love had only grown stronger. Daniel had been my rock, my confidant, my best friend. He'd supported me through the stressful times at work, celebrated my successes, and always made me feel loved. The song came to an end, and applause erupted around us. We made our way back to the head table, where champagne flutes awaited us. Daniel's father, Richard, stood up, tapping his glass gently with a spoon to get everyone's attention. "If I could have everyone's attention, please," he said, his deep voice carrying across the room. "I'd like to propose a toast to the happy couple." A hush fell over the guests as they turned to listen. Richard cleared his throat, his eyes misty as he looked at us. "Daniel, son, I couldn't be prouder of the man you've become. And Emma," he turned to me with a warm smile, "you've brought so much joy into our lives. I know your love will withstand any challenge life throws your way." To Daniel and Emma, To Daniel and Emma, the crowd echoed, raising their glasses. I blinked back tears, touched by Richard's words. If only Eleanor shared his sentiments, I thought fleetingly. As if summoned by my thoughts, I spotted Eleanor making her way towards us. Her silver hair was impeccably styled, and her designer dress probably cost more than my entire wedding. But it was the look in her eyes that made my blood run cold, a mixture of anger and determination that sent a shiver down my spine. "You're nothing but a gold-digging witch," she spat, her sharp voice slicing through the festivities like a blade. The words hung in the air, shocking in their venom and unexpectedness. A hush settled over the guests, the music stumbled into silence, and hundreds of disbelieving eyes turned toward us. My hands trembled as I clutched my bouquet, my heart racing like a trapped animal. This couldn't be happening. Not here, not now. I looked at Daniel, silently pleading for him to say something, to defend me. But to my horror, he had turned ghostly white. His jaw flexed, his hands clenched into trembling fists. "Be quiet, Mother, or we'll all be out on the street," he blurted out, panic lacing his voice. Murmurs surged through the crowd like a ripple through still water, confusion and curiosity buzzing among the guests. What was happening? What had she meant? And why did Daniel seem to fear her outburst more than anything else? I felt as if the floor had dropped out from beneath me. The beautiful day I had dreamed of for so long was crumbling around me, and I was powerless to stop it. As Eleanor's accusation hung in the air and Daniel's cryptic response echoed in my ears, I realized that the fairytale wedding I thought I was having was about to turn into something far more complicated and painful than I could have ever imagined. The once joyous atmosphere of the ballroom had transformed into a tense, suffocating space. Guests shifted uncomfortably, some averting their eyes, others openly staring at the unfolding drama. The clinking of glasses and cheerful chatter had been replaced by hushed whispers and shocked gasps. I stood there, frozen, my mind racing to make sense of what was happening. How had we gone from the perfect wedding to this nightmare in a matter of moments? And more importantly, what did Eleanor mean? What was Daniel hiding? As the silence stretched on, becoming almost unbearable, I knew that this was a turning point. Whatever happened next would change everything. The life I thought I was stepping into, the future I had planned with Daniel, it all hung in the balance, threatened by secrets I didn't yet understand. With a deep breath, I steeled myself for what was to come. One way or another, I was going to get to the truth. Even if it meant shattering the illusion of perfection I had clung to for so long. Eleanor's glare flickered between me and her son, her chest rising and falling with indignation. The silence in the ballroom was deafening, broken only by the occasional clink of a glass or the rustle of fabric as guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. I could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes on us, waiting to see how this drama would unfold. "So, it's true then," Eleanor said, shaking her head with bitter amusement. Her voice, though softer now, still carried across the room. "You actually let her dig her claws into you entirely. A woman with no name, no legacy, she's nothing." The words stung, each one a sharp jab to my heart. But it was Daniel's reaction that sent a chill down my spine. He wasn't rushing to defend me, he wasn't denying her accusations. He was just silent. His face had drained of all color, his eyes darting between his mother and me as if trapped between two impossible choices. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. The bouquet in my hands suddenly felt heavy, the delicate flowers a stark contrast to the ugliness of the moment. I stepped forward, forcing my voice to be steady. "I think it's time you explained yourself, Eleanor," I said, my pulse hammering in my throat. "You've insulted me in front of everyone on what should be the best day of my life. What exactly do you think I've done?" Eleanor let out a bitter laugh, the sound echoing off the high ceilings of the ballroom. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, her voice dripping with condescension, "if only you knew." She turned to the crowd, addressing them as if in a courtroom. "Daniel never told you the real reason he married her, did he?" A wave of murmurs swept through the guests. I saw my parents exchange worried glances, my father half rising from his seat as if to intervene. But I held up a hand, silently asking him to wait. I needed to hear this, no matter how painful it might be. Eleanor's gaze flicked back to Daniel, her eyes narrowing. "Tell them, Daniel. Or should I? Daniel let out a shuddering breath, his fingers pressing against his temples. Mother, please. He muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. It was the plea of a man who knew he was beaten, who saw no way out of the trap he'd set for himself. Fine, I'll do it. Eleanor turned back to the guests, her voice rising with each word. This wedding, this entire relationship, is nothing but a business deal. Gasps rippled through the audience, and I felt my stomach drop. Daniel chose her because without her family's money, we would have lost everything. I begged him to find another way, but no. He proposed to the first wealthy woman he could manipulate. And look at him now, terrified that the truth is finally out. My breath caught in my throat. Was this true? I spun to face Daniel, searching his face for denial, for confirmation, for anything. But his silence was the only answer I needed. He couldn't even meet my eyes, his gaze fixed on the floor as if he could will himself to disappear. The weight of betrayal crushed my chest, making it hard to breathe. My mind reeled, trying to process this new reality. Had our love been a lie from the very beginning? Had I been nothing more than a financial lifeline to him? Every moment we'd shared, every I love you, every promise for the future, had it all been part of an elaborate con? I thought back to the night Daniel had proposed. We'd been walking through Central Park, the autumn leaves crunching beneath our feet. He'd seemed nervous, fidgeting with something in his pocket. When he finally dropped to one knee, pulling out a stunning diamond ring, I'd been overwhelmed with joy. Now, that memory was tainted, twisted into something ugly and false. Is it true? I whispered, my voice barely audible. But in the silence of the ballroom, it carried. Daniel, look at me. Is what she's saying true? Slowly, painfully, Daniel raised his eyes to meet mine. The anguish I saw there was answer enough, but I needed to hear him say it. Emma, He started, then faltered. It's not that simple. It seems pretty simple to me, I shot back, anger beginning to replace the shock. You lied to me. You used me. Was any of it real? Daniel reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Emma, please, let me explain, he pleaded. Yes, at first, it was about the money. My family was in trouble, and I didn't know what else to do. But then I got to know you, and I fell in love. I swear, what we have now is real. I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that didn't sound like me at all. Real? How can any of this be real when it's built on a lie? I turned to face the guests, suddenly aware that we were having this intensely personal conversation in front of hundreds of people. But it was too late for privacy now. The truth was out, ugly and raw, for everyone to see. I'm sorry you all had to witness this, I said, my voice shaking. It seems I'm as much a fool as any of you. I thought I was marrying for love, but apparently, I was just a convenient ATM. Eleanor scoffed. Oh, don't play the victim, dear. You got what you wanted too. A handsome husband, entry into our social circle. Don't pretend you're completely innocent in all this. I whirled to face her, anger flaring hot and bright. I never wanted any of that. I loved your son for who he was, not for his name or his connections. I would have married him if he didn't have a penny to his name. But I guess the concept of marrying for love is foreign to you, isn't it, Eleanor? A hush fell over the crowd at my outburst. Even Eleanor seemed taken aback, her usual composure slipping for just a moment. But she quickly recovered, her face settling back into its mask of disdain. Love, she sneered. Love doesn't pay the bills. Love doesn't maintain a legacy. You're naive if you think otherwise. I felt a hand on my arm and turned to see my father standing beside me. His face was a mix of concern and barely contained anger. That's enough, he said, his voice firm. I think it's time we ended this spectacle. But I wasn't ready to let it go. Not yet. I turned back to Daniel, who was standing there looking lost and defeated. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, my voice softer now, tinged with sadness more than anger. If you really loved me, why keep this secret? Daniel ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd always found endearing but now seemed like just another part of his act. I was afraid, he admitted. Afraid of losing you, afraid of disappointing my family. I kept telling myself I'd find the right moment to explain everything, But there's never a right moment to admit you've been lying to someone for years, I finished for him. He nodded, looking miserable. I'm so sorry, Emma. I never meant for it to go this far. I never meant to hurt you. I closed my eyes, feeling suddenly exhausted. The weight of my wedding dress, which had made me feel like a princess just hours ago, now felt suffocating. The ring on my finger, which I'd admired countless times since he'd slipped it on, now felt like it was burning my skin. When I opened my eyes again, I saw that many of the guests had started to leave, slipping out quietly as if afraid to draw attention to themselves. Those who remained watched us with a mix of pity and morbid fascination. This would be the talk of the town for months to come, I realized. The society wedding that imploded spectacularly. I think, I said slowly, that we all need some time to process this. I turned to the remaining guests. I'm sorry, but I think it's best if we end the reception here. Thank you all for coming, and I'm sorry you had to see this. As people began to file out, murmuring among themselves, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. The initial shock and anger were fading, replaced by a sort of numbness. I knew the real pain would come later, when I was alone and the full weight of what had happened hit me. I looked at Daniel one last time. Despite everything, my heart still ached at the sight of him looking so broken. But I couldn't trust that feeling anymore. I couldn't trust anything. I need some time, I told him. Don't follow me. Don't try to explain. Just give me space. Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked out of the ballroom, my wedding dress trailing behind me. As I pushed through the doors, leaving behind the ruins of what should have been the happiest day of my life, I realized that this was just the beginning. The truth was out, yes, but its full implications were yet to be understood. As I made my way to the elevator, alone, I couldn't help but wonder, where do we go from here? How do you rebuild when the foundation of your relationship turns out to be nothing but sand? And more importantly, did I even want to try? The elevator doors closed behind me, shutting out the sounds of the dismantling reception. As it began its descent, I leaned against the wall, finally allowing the tears to fall. The truth had been unveiled, but the path forward was anything but clear. The hotel suite that had been a haven of excitement and anticipation just hours ago now felt like a prison. I sat on the edge of the king-sized bed, still wearing my wedding dress, its voluminous skirts spread around me like a deflated balloon. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional muffled sound from the hallway. Probably the last of our guests leaving, I thought bitterly. A gentle knock on the door startled me out of my thoughts. Emma. Honey, it's Mom. Can I come in? I hesitated for a moment before answering. Yeah, come in. The door opened, and my mother entered, her face a mixture of concern and anger. She sat down next to me, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. Oh, sweetheart, she sighed, I'm so sorry. I leaned into her embrace, feeling like a little girl again, seeking comfort from a scraped knee. Only this pain went far deeper than any childhood injury. I can't believe this is happening, I whispered. How could I have been so blind? Mom squeezed my shoulder. This isn't your fault, Emma. Daniel, he fooled all of us. Just then, there was another knock. This time, it was my father's voice. Emma, Daniel's here. He wants to talk to you. Should I send him away? I took a deep breath, steeling myself. As much as I wanted to hide away and lick my wounds, I knew we needed to have this conversation. No, it's okay. Let him in. My mother gave me a questioning look. Are you sure? You don't have to do this now. I nodded. I need answers, Mom. I can't move forward until I understand what's really going on. She kissed my forehead and stood up. All right. We'll be right outside if you need us. As she left, Daniel entered. He had loosened his tie and his hair was disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly. The sight of him, so familiar yet suddenly so foreign, made my heart ache. Emma, he began, his voice hoarse. I don't even know where to start. I straightened my back, determined to stay strong. How about the truth, Daniel? The whole truth this time. He nodded, sinking into a nearby chair. You deserve that. God, you deserve so much better than this. He took a deep breath. My family, we're broke. Or we were about to be. The company my great-grandfather built, the legacy that's been passed down through generations, it was all about to come crashing down. I frowned. But your family always seemed so wealthy. The houses, the cars, the parties. Daniel laughed bitterly. All smoke and mirrors. We've been living on credit and reputation for years. Dad made some bad investments, took some risks that didn't pay off. And instead of cutting our losses, we just kept digging ourselves deeper. The pieces were starting to fall into place. So when I met you, Daniel continued, I saw a lifeline. Your family's tech company was doing well, and I thought if I could secure an alliance through marriage, it might save us. He ran a hand over his face. God, it sounds so cold and calculated when I say it out loud. I felt a surge of anger. That's because it was cold and calculated, Daniel. You were playing with my life, my heart. I know, he said quickly. And I hate myself for it. But Emma, you have to believe me, somewhere along the way, it stopped being about the money. I fell in love with you, truly and deeply. I stood up, needing to put some distance between us. How can I believe anything you say now? How do I know this isn't just another lie to keep me from walking away? Daniel stood too, taking a step towards me. Because I'm willing to walk away from it all. The money, the family name, all of it. I'll start over from scratch if that's what it takes to prove to you that my love is real. I stared at him, trying to reconcile the man I thought I knew with this new reality. And what about your family? Your mother seemed pretty set on this plan. Daniel's face hardened. My mother, she's always been more concerned with appearances than anything else. She'd rather see me in a loveless marriage than admit that the great Hartley family has fallen on hard times. Just then, as if summoned by our conversation, there was another knock on the door. This time, it was Eleanor's sharp voice that came through. Daniel, I know you're in there. We need to talk. I saw panic flash across Daniel's face. Emma, please, don't let her in. I can't deal with her right now. But I was done hiding. Done with the secrets and the lies. I strode to the door and yanked it open. Come in, Eleanor. I think it's time we all had an honest conversation. Eleanor swept into the room, her eyes darting between Daniel and me. So, have you two sorted out this little misunderstanding? I laughed incredulously. Misunderstanding? Is that what you call lying about the entire basis of our relationship? Oh, don't be so dramatic, Eleanor snapped. Marriages have been built on less. At least my son had the decency to fall in love with you along the way. Daniel stepped forward. That's enough, Mother. I'm done with your schemes and your manipulation. I'm going to tell Emma everything, and then I'm going to do whatever it takes to make this right. Eleanor's face paled. Daniel, think about what you're doing. If you walk away now, you'll have nothing. No money, no connections, no future. I'll have my integrity, Daniel shot back. And maybe, if I'm very lucky and do a lot of groveling, I'll still have Emma. I felt a flicker of something. Not forgiveness, not yet. But maybe a tiny spark of hope. Still, there were so many questions left unanswered. Just how bad is it? I asked. The debt, I mean. Daniel sighed. Bad. We're talking millions. The company's been operating in the red for years, propped up by loans and creative accounting. If we don't turn things around soon, we'll lose everything. The house, the vacation properties, even the company itself. The enormity of it hit me like a tidal wave. This wasn't just about Daniel and me anymore. There were employees to think about, people whose livelihoods depended on the Hartley family business. And you thought marrying me would solve all of this? Not solve, Daniel clarified. But it would have bought us time, given us a chance to restructure, to save what we could. Eleanor interjected, her voice softer now. Emma, I know you must think the worst of us. But try to understand, this company, this legacy, it's been in our family for generations. The thought of losing it all. For the first time, I saw a crack in Eleanor's icy facade. Behind the sharp words and manipulative schemes was a woman terrified of losing everything she'd ever known. It didn't excuse her actions, or Daniel's, but it helped me understand them a little better. I sank back onto the bed, suddenly exhausted. I need time to think, I said. It's too much to process all at once. Daniel nodded. Of course. Take all the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready to talk again. He moved towards the door, then paused. For what it's worth, Emma, I am truly sorry. Not just for lying, but for ever thinking that money or status could be more important than love. As he left, Eleanor lingered. I suppose I owe you an apology as well, she said stiffly. My actions were misguided. But I hope you can understand that I was only trying to protect my family. I looked at her, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time. I understand, Eleanor. But protecting your family shouldn't come at the cost of hurting others. She nodded, a flicker of respect in her eyes. Perhaps you're right. I'll leave you to your thoughts. As the door closed behind her, I was left alone with the weight of everything I'd learned. The man I loved had lied to me, used me as part of a scheme to save his family's fortune. But he'd also fallen in love with me along the way, and now seemed willing to give up everything to prove that love was real. I thought about my own family, about the company my parents had built from the ground up. They had always taught me that integrity was more important than money, that love and honesty were the foundations of a happy life. How could I reconcile those values with what Daniel and his family had done? And yet, I couldn't deny that a part of me still loved Daniel. Despite the lies, despite the manipulation, my heart still skipped a beat when he walked into a room. Was that love strong enough to overcome this betrayal? Could we rebuild our relationship on a foundation of honesty? Or would the weight of this debt, both financial and emotional, prove too much to bear? As I sat there, surrounded by the trappings of what should have been the happiest day of my life, I realized that the path forward was far from clear. The weight of debt, Daniel's family's financial troubles, the emotional debt he now owed me, the weight of expectations and societal pressures, it all pressed down on me, demanding a decision. But it was a decision I wasn't ready to make. Not yet. For now, all I could do was sit with these new truths, try to separate fact from fiction, and figure out what I truly wanted, not just for myself, but for my future, whatever shape it might take. The weight of debt was heavy indeed, but the weight of the choice before me felt even heavier. The days following what should have been my wedding blurred together in a haze of tears, anger, and confusion. I'd moved back to my parents' house, needing the comfort of familiar surroundings as I tried to make sense of my new reality. My wedding dress hung in the closet, a painful reminder of dreams shattered and promises broken. I sat on the window seat in my childhood bedroom, staring out at the garden where I'd once played without a care in the world. How I longed for that simplicity now. The choice before me seemed impossible, a choice between the man I loved, despite his betrayal, and the freedom to walk away, to start anew without the weight of lies and expectations. A soft knock on the door pulled me from my thoughts. "Come in," I called, not taking my eyes off the window. My best friend, Sarah, poked her head in. "Hey, Em. Thought you could use some company, and some chocolate." She held up a bag from our favorite candy store. I managed a small smile. "You're a lifesaver." Sarah settled beside me, opening the bag and offering me first pick. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, the sweet taste of chocolate a stark contrast to the bitterness in my heart. "So," Sarah finally said, "have you decided what you're going to do?" I sighed, leaning my head against the cool glass of the window. "Honestly, I have no idea. Every time I think I've made up my mind, I second-guess myself." Sarah nodded sympathetically. "It's a tough situation. On one hand, Daniel lied to you, used you, even. But on the other hand, I still love him," I finished for her. "God, Sarah, is that crazy? After everything he's done, how can I still have feelings for him?" "It's not crazy," Sarah assured me. "Love doesn't just disappear overnight, even when someone hurts us. The question is that love enough? Can you trust him again?" I pondered her words. Trust. That was the crux of it, wasn't it? Daniel had broken my trust in the most fundamental way. But then I remembered the look in his eyes when he'd offered to walk away from everything for me. Was that the act of a man who didn't truly love me? "I don't know if I can trust him," I admitted. But I don't know if I can walk away without at least trying to understand, to see if there's anything left to salvage. Sarah squeezed my hand. Whatever you decide, I'm here for you. Just, don't let guilt or obligation make the decision for you, okay? You deserve to be happy, Em. As Sarah left, her words echoed in my mind. Happiness. What did that look like for me now? Before all this, I thought I knew, a life with Daniel, building a future together. Now, that future was shrouded in uncertainty. My phone buzzed, breaking into my thoughts. It was a text from Daniel. Can we talk? Please. I stared at the screen, my heart racing. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to keep hiding away until I had everything figured out. But I knew that wasn't fair, to him or to myself. With shaking hands, I typed out a reply, okay. Meet me at the park in an hour. An hour later, I found myself walking through the familiar paths of the local park. It was a beautiful day, families picnicking on the grass, children laughing as they chased each other. The normalcy of it all felt surreal against the chaos of my emotions. I spotted Daniel sitting on a bench near the pond, his shoulders slumped, looking nothing like the confident man I'd fallen in love with. As I approached, he looked up, hope and fear warring in his eyes. Emma, he breathed, standing up. Thank you for coming. I nodded, sitting down and gesturing for him to do the same. We sat in awkward silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken words hanging between us. Finally, Daniel spoke. I've been doing a lot of thinking these past few days. About us, about my family, about the kind of man I want to be. I turned to look at him, really look at him. The bags under his eyes spoke of sleepless nights, and there was a vulnerability in his expression that I'd never seen before. And what have you decided? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Daniel took a deep breath. I've decided that I want to be the kind of man who deserves your love. I've told my parents that I'm walking away from the family business, from their schemes. I'm going to start over, build something honest from the ground up. I felt my heart skip a beat. Daniel, that's a big decision. Are you sure? He nodded, his eyes never leaving mine. I'm sure. Emma, I know I hurt you, and I know sorry isn't enough. But I want to spend the rest of my life making it up to you, if you'll let me. The sincerity in his voice was overwhelming. But still, doubt niggled at the back of my mind. How do I know this isn't just another grand gesture? How can I trust that you won't fall back into old habits when things get tough? Daniel reached for my hand, then seemed to think better of it, letting his own fall back into his lap. You're right to doubt me. I haven't earned your trust. But I'm asking for a chance to rebuild it. Day by day, with complete honesty. I closed my eyes, feeling tears threatening to spill over. When I opened them again, I saw Daniel watching me, waiting patiently for my response. I need time, I said finally. This isn't a decision I can make right now. I need to figure out what I want, separate from you, separate from your family's expectations. Daniel nodded, a mix of disappointment and understanding on his face. I understand. Take all the time you need. I'll be here, working on becoming the man you deserve, whether you choose to be with me or not. As we parted ways, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief at having faced Daniel, confusion about my own feelings, and a tiny spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, there was a path forward for us. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of self-reflection and soul-searching. I threw myself into work, grateful for the distraction. My colleagues were understanding, having heard whispers of what had happened at the wedding. They gave me space when I needed it and support when I asked for it. In the evenings, I found myself having long talks with my parents. Their wisdom and unconditional love were a balm to my wounded heart. Honey, my mom said one night as we sat on the porch swing, I know you're torn. But remember, you don't owe Daniel or his family anything. This decision has to be about what's best for you. Dad nodded in agreement. Your mom's right. We raised you to be strong and independent. Whatever you decide, we'll support you. But don't let fear of the unknown hold you back from what might make you truly happy. Their words stuck with me, forcing me to confront the real question at the heart of my dilemma. What did I want? Not what Daniel wanted, not what his family expected, not even what my own parents hoped for me. What did I, Emma, truly want for my life? I thought about the dreams I'd had before meeting Daniel, traveling the world, maybe starting my own business. I'd put those dreams on hold, caught up in the whirlwind of our relationship and the expectations that came with marrying into the Hartley family. But now, those dreams whispered to me again. The freedom to choose my own path, to make mistakes and learn from them without the weight of generations of expectations on my shoulders. It was tempting, so tempting. And yet, the thought of a life without Daniel still felt like missing a piece of myself. Despite everything, I couldn't deny the love I still felt for him. As the days passed, I found myself gravitating towards the local community center. I'd volunteered there in college, before life got so complicated. Now, I found solace in helping others, in being part of something bigger than myself. It was there, sorting donations for the center's food bank, that I had my epiphany. I realized that the choice before me wasn't just between love and freedom, it was about choosing myself. Choosing to be true to my own values, my own dreams, regardless of whether that path included Daniel or not. With sudden clarity, I knew what I had to do. I pulled out my phone and sent a text to Daniel, "Meet me at our spot. It's time we talked." As I waited for his reply, I felt a sense of calm settle over me. The weight of indecision lifted from my shoulders. Whatever happened next, I knew I was making the right choice, not just for Daniel or for his family, but for me. The path ahead was still uncertain, full of potential pitfalls and challenges. But for the first time since that fateful wedding day, I felt ready to face it. Whether that meant building a new future with Daniel or forging my own path alone, I knew I had the strength to handle whatever came next. As I left the community center, stepping out into the warm sunshine, I took a deep breath. The choice between love and freedom wasn't an either-or proposition after all. The real choice was in being true to myself, in demanding honesty and respect not just from others, but from myself as well. With that thought firmly in mind, I headed towards the place where I would meet Daniel, ready to shape the next chapter of my life, whatever it might hold. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink as I made my way to the little coffee shop where Daniel and I had our first date. My heart was pounding, but my steps were steady. For the first time in weeks, I felt sure of myself, of what I wanted. I spotted Daniel as soon as I walked in. He was sitting at our usual table by the window, 2 cups of coffee in front of him. He stood up when he saw me, a mix of hope and anxiety on his face. "Emma," he said softly as I approached. "Thank you for coming." I nodded, sitting down across from him. "Thanks for meeting me here." We sat in silence for a moment, the familiar aroma of coffee surrounding us. It was strange how something so normal could feel so foreign now. Finally, Daniel spoke. "I've missed you, Em. These past weeks, they've been hell." I took a deep breath. "I know. They've been difficult for me too. But I needed that time, Daniel. I needed to figure out who I am and what I want, outside of us, outside of your family's expectations." He nodded, his eyes never leaving mine. "And have you figured it out, I mean?" I looked down at my coffee, gathering my thoughts. "I think I have. But before I tell you my decision, I need to know something. If I choose to give us another chance, what would that look like? What kind of life are you offering?" Daniel leaned forward, his voice earnest. "A honest one. I meant what I said before, Emma. I'm walking away from the family business, from all of it. I've already started looking for jobs, normal jobs where I can earn an honest living." "And your parents?" I asked. "How have they taken that news?" A flicker of pain crossed Daniel's face. "Not well. Mom, well, you can imagine. She thinks I'm throwing everything away. Dad is more understanding, but he's disappointed. But Emma, I don't care. I'd rather have you and my integrity than all the money and status in the world." I felt a warmth bloom in my chest at his words, but I pushed it aside. I needed to stay focused. "And what about us? How can we move forward after everything that's happened?" Daniel reached across the table, hesitating for a moment before gently taking my hand. "With complete honesty. No more secrets, no more lies. I know I've broken your trust, and I know it'll take time to rebuild it. But I'm willing to do whatever it takes, Emma. Counseling, if you think it would help. Taking things slow. Whatever you need. I looked at our joined hands, then back up at Daniel's face. I saw the man I'd fallen in love with, but I also saw someone new, someone humbled, someone who had faced his mistakes and was genuinely trying to be better. Okay, I said softly. I believe you. And I'm willing to try. The relief on Daniel's face was palpable. Really? Oh, Emma, I promise you won't regret this. I'll spend every day proving to you that your trust isn't misplaced. I held up a hand, stopping him. Wait, Daniel. There's more. I'm willing to give us another chance, but on my terms. He nodded, listening intently. First, I continued, we're starting over. No engagement, no rushing into marriage. We date, like a normal couple. We take the time to really get to know each other, without any pretenses or expectations. Of course, Daniel agreed quickly. Anything you want. Second, I said, I want to pursue my own dreams. Remember how I always talked about starting my own non-profit? I want to do that. And I need to know that you'll support me, not just with words, but with actions. Daniel smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes. Emma, that's wonderful. Of course I'll support you. I'll help in any way I can. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. This was it, the moment of truth. And finally, I said, my voice steady, I need you to understand that I'm choosing this. I'm choosing us. Not because I feel obligated, not because of any expectations, but because I want to. But I also need you to know that if there are any more lies, any more deception, I'll walk away. No second chances. Daniel's grip on my hand tightened slightly. I understand. And I promise you, Emma, no more lies. Ever. As we sat there, the last rays of sunlight streaming through the window, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, I knew that. We had a lot of work to do, a lot of trust to rebuild. But for the first time since that disastrous wedding day, I felt hopeful about our future. We left the coffee shop hand in hand, stepping out into the cool evening air. As we walked, Daniel turned to me. So, tell me about this non-profit idea of yours. I want to hear everything. And so I did. We spent the next hour walking through the park, talking about my plans to help underprivileged kids access education resources. Daniel listened attentively, asking questions and offering suggestions. It felt normal. Like the beginning of something new and exciting. When we finally parted ways, Daniel pulled me into a gentle hug. Thank you, he whispered. For giving us, another chance. I won't let you down. I hugged him back, allowing myself to enjoy the familiar comfort of his embrace. I know you won't, I replied. And I meant it. As I watched him walk away, I felt a mix of emotions, hope, excitement, a touch of lingering anxiety. But above all, I felt empowered. I had made this choice, on my own terms. Whatever happened next, I knew I had the strength to handle it. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. True to his word, Daniel threw himself into job hunting, eventually landing a position at a local marketing firm. It was a far cry from the cushy executive role he would have had at his family's company, but he seemed genuinely excited about the challenge. I, meanwhile, focused on developing my non-profit idea. I spent hours researching, networking, and planning. Daniel was true to his word, offering support and encouragement every step of the way. Of course, not everything was smooth sailing. Daniel's mother, Eleanor, was furious when she learned of our reconciliation and Daniel's new career path. She showed up at my parents' house one afternoon, her face a mask of cold fury. You've ruined everything, she spat. Years of hard work and planning, all gone because you couldn't stick to the script. I stood my ground, meeting her gaze steadily. I'm sorry you feel that way, Eleanor. But Daniel made his own choices. We both did. She left in a huff, but not before warning me that I'd regret this. As I watched her sleek car pull away, I felt a twinge of sadness for her. How empty must her life be, to place so much importance on money and status? My own parents were cautiously supportive of my decision. Are you sure about this, honey? Mom asked one evening as we sat on the porch. After everything that happened. I nodded, sipping my tea. I'm sure, Mom. I know it won't be easy, but I love him. And I believe he loves me. The real me, not just the idea of me or what I represent. Dad squeezed my shoulder. Then we're behind you, 100%. Just remember, you always have a home here if you need it. Their support meant the world to me, reinforcing that I had made the right choice. As the weeks turned into months, Daniel and I slowly rebuilt our relationship. We went on dates, rediscovering each other without the pressure of impending marriage or family expectations. We talked, really talked, about our hopes, our fears, our dreams for the future. There were difficult moments, of course. Times when the weight of what had happened threatened to overwhelm us. But we faced those moments together, with honesty and compassion. 6 months after that day in the coffee shop, I stood in front of a small gathering of people, my heart racing with excitement. Thank you all for coming, I said, my voice strong and clear. Today, we officially launch Bright Futures, a non-profit dedicated to providing educational resources to underprivileged children in our community. As applause filled the room, I caught Daniel's eye in the crowd. He was beaming with pride, and I felt my heart swell with love and gratitude. This was my dream, coming to life before my eyes. Later that night, as Daniel and I walked hand in hand along the riverfront, I realized something. The power to decide, to shape my own future, to choose love on my own terms, it had always been within me. It took a painful journey to recognize it, but now that I had, I wasn't going to let it go. What are you thinking about? Daniel asked, noticing my contemplative silence. I smiled, squeezing his hand. Just that I'm happy. Really, truly happy. He pulled me close, pressing a kiss to my forehead. Me too, Em. Me too. As we stood there, the city lights twinkling around us, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The future was uncertain, as it always is. But I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, I had the power to face them. The power to decide my own path, to love on my own terms, to build a life that was authentically, unequivocally mine. And that, I realized, was the greatest power of all. A year had passed since that fateful day when I chose to give Daniel and our relationship a second chance. As I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the simple white sundress I'd chosen for today, I couldn't help but marvel at how much had changed. Gone were the elaborate wedding plans, the designer gown, the expectations of a society wedding. In their place was something far more precious, a relationship built on honesty, mutual respect, and genuine love. Emma, are you ready? My mom's voice called from downstairs. I took a deep breath, smoothing down my dress one last time. Coming, Mom. As I descended the stairs, I saw my parents waiting at the bottom, their faces beaming with pride and a touch of nostalgia. Dad's eyes misted over as he saw me. You look beautiful, sweetheart, he said, his voice gruff with emotion. Mom nodded in agreement, reaching out to tuck a stray strand of hair behind my ear. Are you nervous? I considered the question for a moment before shaking my head. No, not really. It feels right. And it did. This time, there was no doubt in my mind, no nagging worry that I was making a mistake. The journey to this point hadn't been easy, but it had been worth every step. We drove to the small garden where the ceremony would take place. It was a far cry from the grand ballroom of a year ago, but as I stepped out of the car and saw the intimate gathering of our closest friends and family, I knew this was exactly what I wanted. My eyes scanned the crowd, landing on familiar faces. Sarah, my best friend, gave me a thumbs up. My colleagues from the non-profit were there, chatting excitedly among themselves. And then I saw him, Daniel, standing at the end of the makeshift aisle, looking handsome in a simple suit. Our eyes met, and the world seemed to fade away. The smile that spread across his face was one of pure joy, mirroring the happiness I felt in my own heart. As the simple ceremony began, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this moment. The past year had been one of growth, challenges, and ultimately, triumph. True to his word, Daniel had thrown himself into his new job at the marketing firm. It hadn't been easy for him, adjusting to a regular 9 to 5 after years of cushy executive positions. There were late nights, frustrating projects, and moments of self-doubt. But he persevered, earning the respect of his colleagues through hard work and dedication. I'd watched him grow, not just professionally, but personally as well. Gone was the man who'd let his family's expectations dictate his life. In his place was someone who stood up for what he believed in, who wasn't afraid to make his own choices. My own journey had been equally transformative. Bright Futures, the non-profit I'd dreamed of for so long, was now a reality. We'd started small, offering after-school tutoring programs in underprivileged neighborhoods. But word spread quickly, and soon we were partnering with local schools and businesses to expand our reach. It wasn't always smooth sailing. There were funding challenges, logistical nightmares, and moments when I questioned if I was in over my head. But with each obstacle overcome, I grew stronger, more confident in my abilities. Daniel had been my rock through it all, offering support, encouragement, and occasionally, a much-needed reality check. We'd learned to communicate openly and honestly, to face our problems head-on instead of letting them fester. Of course, not everyone had been supportive of our choices. Eleanor, Daniel's mother, had remained cold and distant. She'd made a few attempts to persuade Daniel to return to the family business, each one met with a firm but respectful refusal. It had been hard on Daniel, I knew. Despite everything, they were still his family. But he'd stood his ground, choosing to build a life based on his own values rather than their expectations. My thoughts returned to the present as we exchanged our vows. Simple, heartfelt promises to love, support, and respect each other. As Daniel slipped the ring onto my finger, a modest band that meant more to me than any diamond ever could, I felt a sense of completion. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the officiant said, his voice warm. "You may kiss the bride." As Daniel leaned in, I saw in his eyes the same love and commitment I felt in my heart. This kiss wasn't just a seal on our marriage, it was a promise, a new beginning. The small gathering erupted in cheers and applause as we turned to face them, hand in hand. As we made our way back down the aisle, I caught sight of a familiar face at the back of the crowd. Eleanor stood there, looking uncertain and a little out of place in her designer outfit. But she was here, and that meant something. As we passed, she gave a small nod, the barest hint of a smile on her face. It wasn't forgiveness or acceptance, not yet. But it was a start. The reception was a joyful, relaxed affair. Instead of a formal sit-down dinner, we'd opted for a casual barbecue. People mingled freely, the sound of laughter and conversation filling the air. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the gathering, Daniel pulled me aside. "Come with me," he said, a mischievous glint in his eye. "I have a surprise for you." Curious, I followed him to a quiet corner of the garden. There, hidden behind a large oak tree, was a small table set for two, complete with candles and a bottle of champagne. "What's all this?" I asked, touched by the gesture. Daniel grinned, pulling out a chair for me. "Well, I figured with all the craziness of the day, we might not get much time to ourselves. So I arranged a little private moment for us." As we sat there, sipping champagne and sharing quiet conversation, I felt overwhelmed with gratitude. This man, who had once been part of a world so different from my own, had chosen to build a new life with me. A life based on love, honesty, and shared values. "What are you thinking about?" Daniel asked, noticing my contemplative expression. I smiled, reaching across the table to take his hand. "Just how far we've come. A year ago, I never would have imagined we'd be here." He nodded, squeezing my hand. "I know. There were times I thought I'd lost you for good. And I would have deserved it. But you didn't," I said softly. "You proved to me, to both of us, that people can change, that love can overcome even the biggest obstacles." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the sounds of the party drifting over to us. "So, Mrs. Hartley," Daniel said, a playful smile on his face. "What's next for us?" I laughed at the use of my new name. It still felt a bit strange, but in a good way. "Well, Mr. Hartley, I was thinking, maybe it's time we start looking for a place of our own." Daniel's eyes lit up. "Yeah, I'd like that. Something small, cozy. A place we can really make our own." I nodded, already imagining it. "And maybe, In a year or two, we could think about starting a family. The joy on Daniel's face was answer enough, but he leaned in to kiss me anyway. I'd love nothing more, he murmured against my lips. As we rejoined the party, hand in hand, I felt a sense of peace and excitement for the future. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy, I knew that. There would be challenges, disagreements, moments of doubt. But I also knew that we had the strength to face whatever came our way. This new beginning wasn't just about our marriage. It was about the life we were choosing to build together. A life of purpose, of giving back to our community. A life where we supported each other's dreams and faced our fears together. As the night wore on and our friends and family celebrated around us, I caught Daniel's eye across the room. The love I saw there, the promise of a future filled with joy and growth and endless possibilities, made my heart swell. This was our new beginning. And I couldn't wait to see where it would take us.